Serenamente, hop on the beat!
Purple Haze Feedback is a light novel written by Kohei Kodono and released in 2011, which follows the story of Panicotta Fugo after the events of Part 5. Fugo is an interesting character in the history of JoJo. Many people erroneously assume that Fugo was forgotten after he left the group in Part 5, but this is not the case. The original intent was for Fugo to return as an enemy, but this idea was later scrapped due to Araki's mental state at the time. As a result, Fugo was strangely absent from the remainder of the part. Purple Haze Feedback exists to address this, by giving an epilogue to the story of Part 5 and also a look at Fugo's character. With the anime adaptation of Part 5 having concluded a few weeks ago, questions have started to circulate about whether Purple Haze Feedback would receive an anime adaptation. With the announcement of 2 more Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan OVAs, many people have started to complain about no news of a PHF adaptation. In this video, I'll be going over what we know at this point and my reasoning for and against whether the adaptation will happen. First, I'll cover everything that points towards the adaptation being a possibility. Among all of the light novels created for JoJo, Purple Haze Feedback definitely seems to have the largest following. It has also been directly referenced in other media, such as All-Star Battle and Eyes of Heaven, which add attacks from the novel into Fugo's moveset. All-Star Battle also included Purple Haze Feedback as a story mode chapter when you purchase the Fugo DLC character. At Anime Expo 2019, 2 Warner Bros. Japan producers were asked about the possibility of a Purple Haze Feedback adaptation. They stated that it could happen if David Production and Araki were not opposed to it. This is pretty much the default response to a question like this, so it really tells us nothing. Something that would have shut down the possibility entirely would have been the inclusion of Fugo at the end of the anime. I expected this to happen to at least give some closure, but it didn't. Fugo being confronted by Mista at the beginning of the novel is the first time he had seen him in 6 months. If Fugo had appeared in front of Giorno at the end, this would have been a major contradiction, but it didn't happen. The only new thing we see from Fugo is him back in Naples, which doesn't conflict with the book. If David Production wanted to completely dispel the idea of them adapting the novel, they could have done this, but they did not. That's really all there is to say for facts that would support an adaptation happening. The rest of this video is going to cover some of the reasons that I think it won't happen. First and foremost, the book is not written by Araki. Araki did illustrations for the book, but we have no idea how much input he had in the story. As such, its place in canon is tenuous at best. Really, this comes down to David Production, and whether they'd be willing to adapt non-canon JoJo content. If an adaptation were to happen, it would clearly be made as a sequel to the recent Part 5 anime. This would not be possible with a complete adaptation of the book. While the novel fits nicely as a companion piece of the manga, much of the new material added to the anime directly contradicts aspects of the novel. In order of appearance, I'll go over each part of Purple Haze Feedback that has been retconned in the anime. A recurring image throughout the book is the photograph taken by the group before boarding the yacht where they encounter Zukuro. This situation is somewhat similar to the photograph on Jotaro's desk in Part 5. Something that fans would occasionally joke about with that picture is asking when it was taken, as Iggy had already joined the group and Kakyoin had not been injured yet. In the adaptation of Part 3, a scene showing when it was taken was added. Presumably, if there were plans at that point for an adaptation, a scene with this photo would have been added. This is one of the more minor points, since a scene like this could have easily just been presented as a flashback in the PHF adaptation. In the novel, Fugo is shown to have been the one to recruit Abakio to Bucciarati's team. This doesn't conflict with the manga whatsoever, since it was never shown how Abakio joined. However, the anime expanded on Abakio's backstory, showing the moment he joined Passione. While not a large part of the book, it is something that was changed. Unlike the other characters in the manga, Fugo's backstory was left quite open for interpretation. There are only a few details as told by Eluso. The novel took these details and wrote around them, with a backstory that heavily featured Fugo's grandmother, and his pressure at school eventually driving him to violence. This backstory is a large part of Fugo's characterization in the novel. The anime chose to do the same thing, expanding on the already existing details. In the adaptation, Fugo's grandmother is nowhere to be seen, and he is assaulted by the teacher and fights back. While the actions are the same as the ones described in the manga, the context is very different. One of the major characters in the book is Canolo Marolo, a former member of Passione's data analysis team. He is personally the one that helped La Squadra reconstruct the photograph of the OA disc. Some hopes about the PHF adaptation started to stir when the anime actually put some focus on this plot point. New scenes were added of Risotto with a member of the team working on the photo. The character even had a somewhat unique design, as opposed to being some faceless member of Passione. However, one major thing to note is that Marolo willingly worked with La Squadra. In the anime, Risotto is forcing them to work, and kills them after the photo is finished. This cannot possibly line up with the novel. Those are all of the contradictions that come to mind for me, but there may still be others. Personally, I would not mind an adaptation of Purple Haze Feedback. I enjoy the novel quite a lot, and some of the fights and characters original to it are some of my favorites in the series. I just find the incessant begging for the adaptation to be annoying, especially for something that is not very likely to happen in the first place. I find it very likely that a large amount of the people asking for PHF haven't read it, and just know that it has Fugo in it and continues his story. The same is much more likely for the people who are asking for an adaptation of the far more obscure novel, Golden Heart Golden Ring, which hasn't even had a fan translation. I encourage people to read Purple Haze Feedback. It is fully translated and it's not a long read. It'll maybe take a couple of days at max. However, don't have high hopes that it will be animated anytime soon. Thank you for watching. This is the part of the video where I thank my $5 and $10 patrons. Thank you Norden the Lich, thank you Alex Ramirez, thank you Raziana, and thank you Boat Girl.